Ruth. Next week, we'll begin our study of the life of Abraham with the summer series. We'll have visiting speakers. Next Wednesday, we'll have Tommy South here speaking to us on the call of Abraham. So I encourage you to come, and you've got reason to invite people too, because I won't be up here. So that'll be a good reason for people to want to show up. No, nobody wants to deny it. All right. Ruth, so we're in chapter 3. I know I'm not. I know we're not going to be able to finish. I do want to bring up several broad points that Ruth teaches, and hopefully we've touched on as we've gone through. A lot of times we look at the book of Ruth as filler or as a means of telling us about how David, what his lineage was, but it is no matter how you look at it, in all the different ways, it is a story of restoration, and it is just a small tidbit of what God is doing through Christ in bringing His people to Him, bringing us back to Him through that restoration. So as you look at Ruth, you get the definite moving away from God as Elimelech takes his family away to Moab to live there. And then you get the return, seeking out a refuge from God. And then as Naomi and Ruth do that, you see a theme of redemption as Boaz enters the story, as the Redeemer who is coming not just to fulfill God's law and go through the motions, but to really fulfill the intent of the law, to show love, the kind of love that God has for His people, and the kind of love that we should have for one another. So it's a generous, a graceful, and an above and beyond type of love in this redemption story for Naomi and Ruth. And then finally, in the last chapter, you see this picture of restoration. So not only the purchase, the redemption, but through that redemption comes the restoration. And that's what it's all about, that relationship with God that we only have because it was purchased with Christ's blood on the cross, that redeeming purchase that makes it possible for us to be close to God once more. So again, Ruth is not a book to be overlooked, and it's not a book to be shot through as quickly as possible. But that's what we're doing tonight. Chapter 3. I'm not going to take the time to read all these verses just to save a little bit of time. But we looked at some of this last week. We definitely see here when Ruth comes back and tells Naomi about what has happened in the field of Boaz. Naomi has a plan. She has a plan, and she enacts the plan. She tells Ruth to get herself ready, to clean herself up, change her clothes or put on the right clothes, and she tells her to wait for the right time, and she says, uncover your feet and lie down. Again, when she's telling her to do all this, it's all in preparation. This is all part of her plan to make it obvious to Boaz why Ruth is there. Again, the clothing, she's not telling her to wear her nicest clothes. These are clothes that would be described of somebody who might not be well off, but might need to spend the night outside. This is a cloak that people would wrap themselves up in to keep warm in the night. So she's telling her to prepare herself to meet Boaz and prepare. You might be up staying out there all night. Again, this all happens under the concealment of darkness. This is a very private engagement, whereas the first couple chapters, everybody knows what's going on. It's all going on in the light of day. Boaz is making sure that everybody knows. But here, there's a lot of covering going on And I think that's a big point. And the covering is not exploitative. It's not to hide oppression and sin, but it is used as a symbol for protection. And that's what we see here. Ruth is making herself very vulnerable, and they're both vulnerable in this situation. But God is showing what can happen good in this situation as well. There are things in this chapter. I think probably you've heard lessons in the story of Ruth that kind of make you feel uncomfortable, like something is not sitting right in this story. They're alone at night. She's washed herself. She's perfumed herself. She lies down next to a man and uncovers him. So obviously, I think people have looked at this and seen a sexual component. And it has probably, you've heard it, been taught this way. But as we've looked at these characters, that goes against how they've been described to us. These are righteous people. So as the author is describing Ruth and Boaz and Naomi, this would not fit what we're seeing here. So I think what is happening likely is that we're reading into the situation things that we're familiar with. And I'm not saying that we're making a mistake necessarily. I think anybody, no matter what generation they're in, even as people in Samuel's day are reading this, they would have read into it. But I think this is being done to make some points. And just to prove the point that they would have read into it, in the book of Hosea, chapter 9, verse 1, there it mentions these prostitutes who love the threshing floors. They're going out there during this time, even in Hosea's day, these prostitutes, and looking for these men who are away from home in order to bring home a wage. So it wouldn't have been something too surprising, even as people were first reading this, to think, I know what's going to happen here. Even some of the words that are used elsewhere as euphemisms that carry that sexual tone. But again, we have to ask ourselves, is this what is happening? Is this how the story is playing out? Is that the context of the story that we're reading? Or are we reading into it? These words can have sexual tones, but they do not have to. We talked about in chapter 1 at the end of that, we talked about that kind of this name game. We looked into the names and we saw how the names themselves of the various people kind of tell the story of Ruth. And if that was an exercise in how God can use words, I think here we are reminded of we need to be careful about what we do with those words and make sure we understand the full context of the story and not just start labeling things willy-nilly. As a literary device here, I think it presents us with an anticipated moral dilemma. We're expecting something to go wrong. That reflects on us, doesn't it? Now, again, that reflects on anybody who reads this, because I think, again, the story seems to be trending that direction. This is what anybody reading this perhaps would expect to happen. What it does do for us, though, is it shows us the vulnerability of this situation, especially Ruth, being poor, being a Moabitess, being young, being out there on the floor at this time of night. There is much danger in this situation. There's also danger for Boaz and his reputation if people were to find this out. Despite all of those factors, as you're going in and reading that, with all that in the background of your mind, what ends up happening is something surprising. It does not go in that sinful, immoral direction. It goes in a way of grace and restoration and protection all that vulnerability is met with grace and kindness and covenant loyalty. The choice of Hebrew words that are used here, that in other places you might think are being used as sexual innuendo, even the foot being used as a euphemism, is an effort, I think, to distance the story rather than to draw the story closer to what did not happen, to distance the story because we're surprised by the particular word usage and direction. I feel like I'm saying all these things, and maybe I'm not making my point very well. What I believe is happening here is the author is putting them in a difficult situation under cover of night in order to reveal something much more beautiful than what sin would have us believe, than what our enemy would have us to believe. We might go out there expecting one thing. If we were put in that situation, we might expect one thing to happen, but that's not what happens here. And really what it does is highlight Boaz and Ruth and their character and their willingness to give up what they might desire to serve God. You might think to yourself, well, is this something that God is misleading us in? Does God ever use immoral character to teach a lesson? Do you remember Jesus' parable of the unjust steward? In the parable, there's this guy who he's going to be fired, and he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to be fired because he doesn't want to have to go out and beg. So he says, "I know what I'll do. I'll change all the records so that it shows that all the people that owe my master owe him less." He's cheating. He's lying. He's defrauding his master. And the master praises him for it. And we're left thinking, what? What is God wanting us to do this immoral thing? I think what we are to take from that is a lesson of what are we doing? The world itself is contemplating, is thinking about how they can do evil. And the world is praising the world for that. Are we considering what we can do that's good? God will praise us for doing good if we are going about doing that. I believe the best understanding of what's going on here is that the stage is set for suspense. But instead of being surprised by scandal, we're drawn into the virtue of Boaz and Ruth. So again, we don't want to twist the words into something that doesn't fit the context of the story. We want to know the people's character, which we're told about, and we want to know God's character. And if we take that into context of this story, we would realize that that wouldn't happen here, and we might not be as surprised. Language, I found this description. Language is intentionally suggestive, using euphemisms that create dramatic tension. But in the cultural context, nothing sinful actually happens. That's a good example of how we might read into Scripture, not taking into account the context culturally, theologically, scripturally of what's going on. So again, we had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun looking at the names of the people in the story and thinking about how they match the story. But if we don't have the story and we're just going on the names, we've got nothing. It's got to fit the context. So I might say that'll preach. But is that what it teaches? If it's not what it teaches, then we don't want to go down that road. So if it isn't teaching some sexual escapades here in the darkness, then we're left with the flip side of that, which is incredible virtue between these two people who are meeting in the cover of darkness, in this secret meeting. It's a very intimate situation between Boaz and Ruth. And if we were to back up from this and see the relationship between God and his people, Does he care for you individually? Does he care for what you're going through in your own private personal sins and temptations and your trials that face you personally? Does God care about those things that happen in the dark, those things that you want to keep hidden? Does God care? And I think here we see, wow, Boaz is going to get up from this and he's going to get to work because he cares about Ruth. And he's going to do some things here to show that he is concerned about the way that others might view this. It's very interesting. This happens in cover of darkness, and then he goes about and he seems to be doing everything to keep this meeting a secret, and yet we're reading about it. So, and I wonder what Boaz would think of all this, as whoever wrote this, whether it was Samuel or somebody else, is led by the Spirit to write it, that Boaz is trying to keep this on the down low. Here it is revealed to us. Obviously, God has something greater in mind than just showing some sexual tryst in the night. What happens here in this story is interesting too. She's told to go and uncover his feet, and then during the night, he wakes up. Why might he wake up in the middle of the night? His feet are cold. Yeah. So you begin to think, oh, well, maybe that's why she had him uncover his feet. Maybe it had nothing to do with what we first looked at and first thought about the story. She wants this private meeting between Ruth and Boaz, and she knows exactly what she's doing. So let me move forward in this a little bit. She asks Boaz. Ruth asked Boaz to cover her with his garment. Again, we get this idea of covering coming up. It was Naomi told her to wear this cloak that would cover her. She tells her to uncover his feet. What might be another possible reason for uncovering the feet? Well, it would wake him up, but it would also give her a good application, an illustrative lesson for Boaz. Cover me with your wing. If you remember, Boaz prayed, blessed Ruth in chapter 2, saying that the Lord repay you for what you've done, under whose wings you've come to take refuge. I think Ruth is reminding him of that statement. Look, spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. I could imagine her with that flap that she's uncovered his feet with. Cover me. Now, this is more than just protective speech. This is the kind of language of a proposal. Ruth is proposing marriage. Boaz finds this surprising. Why? Huh? He's old. She's young. The expectation, again, would be for a young woman to go after a young man. Strong, fit, good looking. He's an old man. No offense. But he had no expectations of providing for Ruth in this way. And I think this is another reason Naomi might have sent her in the way that he did, to make the statement of, yes, this is what I want. Otherwise, why would I be here? So she is reminding him of his prayer and asking him to work to fulfill the prayer that he asked God for, to be a tool in that. Let's see. I want to move toward. I do not remember making these slides. I'm looking for a verse. Are these the slides? Yeah, they are. Oh, okay. Oh, I see what's happened. Okay. Let's read. I said I wasn't going to read, but let's go ahead and read. Ruth 3:14. She lay at his feet until morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out. So she held it and measured about 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city. 6 measures is interesting because last time it said ephahs. We don't know how much this was. If it was ephahs, it would have been something like 200 pounds. She's not carrying that. We don't know how much it is. We're just told six measures. Well, I'll come back to that. Verse 16, when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did you fare, my daughter? Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but settle the matter today. This is the last thing we hear from Ruth. The last words that we hear from Ruth. Now the story is going to switch back. Now it's still Ruth's definitely going to be a part of this story, but as it progresses, it's going to turn back to Naomi, and the story again becomes the restoration of Naomi's family and Elimelech's line. So we move on to chapter 4, and we find Boaz center of attention. Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. Now he is, just like Ruth had gone out and been gleaning and gathering all this food. Now Boaz is the one gathering. And he's gathering the men together. He needs 10 men to make a quorum, to have as witnesses to help them decide. And what he is doing is making sure he has all his T's crossed and I's dotted to make sure that he can be the redeemer for Ruth. He told her that there is somebody closer in relationship than him. So he would act as redeemer. But there's somebody, another relative closer. He's also waiting for the Redeemer. And the way he's presented is, behold, the Redeemer. He sat down, and what do you know? Here comes the Redeemer. Again, as if by chance. This is all falling into place for Ruth and Boaz. And he tells them to sit there. Dwell here for a while. Turn aside, friend. Sit. And then he tells these 10 men, just wait here. Everything begins to slow down in this story as we get to this portion. Verses 3 through 10 are going to tell the story of this legal transaction, you might call it, but we'll look at it in a second. He said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling a parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there's no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. So this is the man, Boaz, who wants to marry Ruth. He has to redeem her. And he goes to the man who is closer and says, will you redeem? And he says, yes. How do you like that for an ending? What happens to Boaz? The other guy decides he's going to redeem the land. Now remember, Elimelech had left. Most likely, he had to sell his property. That property, in order to go back to Naomi, would have to be redeemed. And this is the type of redemption we're talking about here. Whoever buys this land is going to have it for himself. It's his inheritance now. But what this guy might not realize is that it comes with Ruth. And so Boaz clears that up for him. In verse 5, Boaz says, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead and his inheritance. And the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now, this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. The one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that had belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead might not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. He wants everybody to know. And he's using all this wordage to make sure not just the person he's making the deal with, this Redeemer, knows, but that there are witnesses, that everybody knows. He doesn't want to lose Ruth or Elimelech's inheritance in the future. There's a lot going on here in this passage. We go back to what a goel is. Kinsman redeemer. We can see in the law how this position, this goel, this kinsman redeemer comes up. Most likely, they are looking at the kinsman redeemer as the one who is going to redeem lost property. The land was meant to be passed down from generation to generation within the family. The first thing that Boaz brings up to this redeemer is that Naomi has this land for sale. And what that means is, without getting into the nitty-gritty, is that they are in need of somebody to buy this back. If he buys it, he's going to take care of Naomi. Naomi's too old to have any kids. So this is going to be part of his family inheritance from now on, whoever redeems this land. So we also get an idea here, or a feeling of levirate marriage. Levirate marriage is basically your brother's wife. I don't know what it means. I wrote it down somewhere, but I'm way off on my notes so far. It's silly. Levirate marriage, you can find it described in Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10, which basically says this is what happens if there's a woman, an Israelite, who is married to a man, and the man dies before she has any kids. The nearest brother is to marry that wife, to have kids by her, and take on, that child will take on the inheritance of his father. It talks about a brother. It talks about a shoe, but it doesn't exactly fit what's going on here with Boaz. And one of the big reasons is because he's not a brother. He's not that close a kinsman. A goel might redeem land, family, or he might get restitution. The lever, he is going to preserve the dead brother's name and lineage. Boaz does both. So it does get a little bit confusing. A goel is a closest male relative. A lever is the dead man's brother. Boaz is not his brother. A goel is voluntary. You can choose to do this. As a redeemer, you have first pick. That's why Boaz goes to the other redeemer who is a closer relative. This is your job. This is your responsibility. Do you want to do this? Because if you don't, I will. That's the goel. It's voluntary. It's encouraged by culture, but not as much as the levirate marriage. That's almost obligatory. In Deuteronomy, it tells you if the man refuses, then basically he goes through this shameful process, and he'll be known as the man without the sandal, or something to that effect. In other words, everyone will know of his shame. What's interesting in Ruth chapter 4 is whoever wrote it tells us about this custom. He doesn't describe it as the law of the land, but a custom of the day. It's interesting on many levels, but what I like about it is Boaz does not have to marry Ruth. But between these two laws, you get the intent of the law is to make sure a name is not lost among the people, to make sure there is a redeemer for those who have lost, for those who are oppressed, for those who are vulnerable. Boaz plays the role of both of those characters. And there was custom, if not law, for this to take place, for a goel to be able to preserve the lineage of the relative. And we can get into all the nitty gritty of okay, so how does the inheritance work? But we don't have a lot of time for that because we've already had one bell. Uh, End of the story, chapter 4. Uh, People begin blessing Naomi and Boaz and Ruth. They speak of Perez, who was the daughter-in-law of, no, Perez was the son of Tamar and Judah all the way back. But they begin talking about this house of Perez. They say to Naomi, he shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher for your old age. In other words, she's taken care of. She's not just been redeemed, but she is restored from here on out. She is taken care of. An interesting piece of this story I thought was interesting. Who names Obed? Obed. Not Ruth, not Boaz, not Naomi. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name. That's interesting. And it reminds me that this culture is not my culture. We are very individualistic. We don't have the same view on how things are done. That's why some pieces of Ruth sound strange to us. What are we concerned about our marrying our dead brother's wife to take care of the family name? We're not concerned with that kind of thing. We're not concerned with our ancient relatives and all these genealogies. This is a different culture, and some of it is by God's law, by intention. Other of it is just a reminder here when the town names your boy that this is a different world that we're not used to. And yet, we can still learn the same lessons. Naomi is restored. Not only that, we are all restored because of the actions of Boaz and Ruth. The lineage continues, passes down from Perez down through the husband of Rahab, down through Ruth, to David, to Christ. It's a beautiful story, and that lineage part of it is just the icing on the cake. If you couldn't see God in this story before, you definitely see it when you consider the lineage. Okay, in the last however many seconds we have, does anybody have any corrections or questions or comments that you want to bring up? I'm sorry it seemed rushed. It was rushed. I hate to rush through a book. There's a lot of beautiful things going on here, and I encourage you to pick up the study yourself. Go back to Ruth and look at some of the things. And if you have questions about it, you can talk to me, but trust God to be there with you as you study that book. Nobody has a comment? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, for example, the Redeemer could have played the part of a Redeemer and yet not married Ruth. In other words, he could have gone with the letter of the law and not the spirit of the law. So he would have gotten the inheritance, he would have passed down that inheritance. But Ruth and Naomi, he doesn't have to take care of them. They would be left to go glean in the fields as Ruth was doing, and until they weren't able to do that anymore. Basically, they were beggars. Women didn't have a lot of rights, and nothing like the past 200 years here. It was much worse than that. So it is, God is picturing the lowest of the low. Not just women either, foreign women without any support, no family. Somebody stepping in and offering them all kinds of grace and generosity. It's beautiful, beautiful story. Good point. That was the second bell. Thanks for your attention.